Hi guys, I'm Danny West and you're back with another episode of The Soapbox, your patient education station. And this week we are talking PLIÉ 101 and a few of the things, or more commonly, some of the things we're seeing when we analyze a simple demi-plie in first position. This is either part of our pre-point screen or might be part of just a general dance assessment, and why we might not want to get into some of these habits from an injury perspective, and also looking at it from a point shoe perspective. Okay, enjoy.
This first one is called the roller inner. So this dancer lacks range of motion and or turnout control at the hip. As a result, the femur or the thigh bone will roll inwards, causing the knees to fall in and also the ankles and feet to roll in as a result. This can end up with knee, ankle, and or foot pain because of this. This next one is called the TibAnt Twitcher. So I'm pointing to the tendon of a muscle called your tibialis anterior that runs along the front of the shin and wraps under the arch. You'll see it pop and twitch there if it's being over-recruited in a plie. It's usually because the dancer's weight is too far back in the heels. So we want to make sure that we're shifted forward so that guy doesn't over-recruit. There it is, kind of popping. Causes a lot of tension in through the front of the ankle and in through the arches, and can restrict our demi-plie range. So we want to make sure this is cleaned up, especially if we're going in a point shoe, something with a shank, it's going to be less stable. So we want to clean this up in our demi-point work. This just takes practice to, again, keep the front of the ankles relaxed and sort out where our weight placement is over our arches. This next one is the uneven dorsiflexor. So what we'll see is the dancer will have one heel come up first as they transition from a demi-plie into a grand plie. This can indicate that that right ankle, in my case, is a little stiffer, so it doesn't have the range of motion. It will come up first on the transition. We want to make sure this is equal side to side, because as we know, a plie is a very important foundation, not just for plies and releves themselves, but also the foundation for jumps. So we want to make sure we have equal range of motion in both ankles. This next demo is talking about pelvic placement in space. So we have this first one, the anterior pelvic tuck, so where the front of the hip bones tip forward. This can be due to poor core control or just poor awareness of where our pelvis is in space. So again, we don't want to tuck our tailbone under. We want to keep our pelvis in what's called a neutral spine. So we'll look at that in a second here. This next one is probably the most important one of the whole video, the glute gripper or the tucker. So these are the dancers that grip their glutes to hold their turnout. And what happens if you over-recruit the glutes, you'll start to tuck the tailbone under and go into a posterior pelvic tilt, which we don't want either. What this is going to do is change how the hip articulates in the socket and cause so much tension in and around the hips. We need to learn, as more intermediate advanced dancers, how to access our deep turnout muscles and hip stabilizers and how to strengthen those without kicking in the glutes. Ideally, we want this neutral pelvis, so neither an anterior or a posterior pelvic tilt, but like our pelvis is an elevator, we're sending it straight down and straight up. Glutes should be soft as we're controlling our turnout from those deep turnout muscles. This next one is for the knee snappers or the knee hyperextenders. As you can see, I have a little bit of hyperextension where my knees will actually go behind my ankles. This can cause a lot of irritation in through the knee joint, and it shifts my weight back into the heels, which can cause some over-recruitment of TibAnt that we saw in the first clip. So we want to make sure we're referencing that neutral knee position instead of doing the snapping back. So when we're looking at a plie, we're looking at all the things. We're looking at shoulders in line with hips. Our weight is transferred right over the center of our arch. We're not back in our heels. We're not gripping through our glutes to hold our turnout. Glutes are soft, and we're working on strengthening the deep rotators of the hip so we can properly rotate those thigh bones open and maintain our turnout throughout a plie. So again, lots to think about when it comes to a plie, and so many times, even the intermediate advanced dancers need to kind of go back to a few basics because a few little habits have formed along the way. We want to make sure they're referencing neutral spine, neutral pelvis, finding that neutral alignment of the knees, and proper weight placement of the feet. They get this down in demi-point, it'll only be easier once they transition to point work.
So I'm sure as teachers, there's a lot of things that are looking familiar in some of those demonstrations. Again, it's an easy fix. So if you can start talking through some of those basic foundations and trying to get rid of some of those little habits that are sneaking up in our demi-pliés, again, they're going to be a little more prepared when we kind of look at them in clinic. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. And if you have any questions, please let me know. And we'll be back next week looking at Tendu 101. Thanks, guys.